2012, a man named Romario dos Santos Alves walked into a bodybuilding gym in Goiânia, Brazil. As he made his way through the gym, he noticed that many of the men working out had massive arms that were almost cartoon-like in size. Curious and interested in becoming as big as possible, he asked them what they did to build their arms, and that was when they introduced him to something called synthol. Romario started injecting himself regularly and found the immediate results to be addicting.
This is expectation versus reality. This is when you take the Rich Piana online alpha male 5%er course, and the only thing 5% about you is your T-cell count from the HIV you contracted from the dirty synthol injections.
Although Romario doesn't dabble with synthol anymore, his desire to become a professional bodybuilder remains, and led him to explore other types of substances like horse tranquilizer. There are many other stories like Romario.
All right, hold the phone. I take exception when you use the vague quantifier many. There are many people who are experiencing this as if this is supposed to be an example of some slippery slope. Like, this is the inevitable conclusion of gym culture as we know it. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and we've been watching like the same 4 or 5 dudes for the last 15 years. There's like the kid from Russia, and all these guys are in like Brazil. You got to go outside of a G7 nation to find these people. And it's not different than any of like the TLC documentaries about people obsessed with their body. You have like Michael Jackson impersonators mutilating themselves. You have women that want to be living sex dolls. These types of people exist, but it's hugely fallacious to think that they would be fine in a vacuum, but once you put them in the real world, it's the environment that does it to them, and that they don't have some predisposition or some unique circumstance that would manifest this type of radical destructive behavior in any other domain. Like, these aren't two sides of the same coin. This is a lazy reductionism that places every disorder at the feet of societal pressures, and mental illness is more complex than that. Not off to a great start.
But the trend of pursuing an increasingly unattainable physique has begun to spread to a more vulnerable demographic: young teenage boys. Bigorexia, a body dysmorphic disorder where an individual obsesses over their muscle mass, has reached a level of serious concern in the fitness industry. One study estimates that 1 in 10 bodybuilders are affected by bigorexia.
All right, I spent like an exhaustive amount of time trying to find a study that came to this conclusion, and I don't think it exists. I think this is a made-up number that everybody just got in the habit of repeating. There's articles that repeat it over and over, like this Men's Health article. The Body Dysmorphic Disorder Foundation found 10% of men in the gym may have it. But if you go to the Body Dysmorphic Disorder Foundation, you find articles about muscle dysmorphia, but you don't find any research paper that lends credibility to this. You just see endless blogs that just repeat it uncritically, because that's the era we live in. Everybody wants the sheen of scienciness, so when they find a statistic, they cling to it, regardless of whether or not it's rooted in reality. Now, I'm going to make the case that a lot of these statistics are bullshit because the science isn't cooked yet. There's a lot of very weak data, a lot of really bad definitions. And if you don't believe me, let's look at the signs to look for muscle dysmorphia. Are you constantly critiquing your body, wanting this part to be larger or that part be smaller? Do you spend much time examining your physique in the mirror? Do you turn down opportunities to spend time with loved ones to work out? Do you find yourself resorting to increasingly extreme means to bulk up? Now, this just described literally every amateur bodybuilder or anybody that stepped foot in the gym with the specific purpose of doing something with their physique. I mean, swap this out for like car nuts. Like, if you're somebody who spends a lot of time working on your car, are you constantly looking at your car, wondering what you can upgrade or improve? Do you spend too much time examining it and looking through magazines for parts you can buy and upgrades you can make? Do you turn down opportunities to spend time with your wife and kids so that you can go work on your goddamn car? Now, we know intuitively the people that take it to the extreme and who are trying to center in on. But the fact is, there's nothing in any of these definitions that are able to separate those extremes that we intuit from regular ass gym goers. And if you cannot define something clearly, if you're forced to cast too wide of an umbrella, that means that your measurements don't mean dick. Now, one of the things that gets considered when diagnosing something like an eating disorder is disordered eating. It's not in and of itself a diagnosis, but it's something that they look at as part of a bigger picture. Dr. Evelyn Adia, Center for Eating Disorders at New York Presbyterian. Eating 3 meals per day, separated by several hours, along with a snack or two. That's healthy eating. Eating from all food groups, like the government food pyramid. You need your grains, you need your milk. Eating a variety of foods, absolutely. You can't limit what you eat. That would be just ridiculous. eating comfortably in social situations. Now, of course, disordered eating is skipping meals. God help you if you do intermittent fasting. It's excluding entire categories of food for your diet. You gotta eat your grains. You gotta eat your meat. You gotta eat your dairy. It's non-optional. Sticking to rigid rules or restrictions. If I eat Whataburger 3 times a day, apparently that's ordered eating. But if I'm like meal prepping and carrying around containers, if I count my macros, like there has to be something to separate out just people who care about their fucking diet. Anxiety about eating in social situations. Yeah, social situations almost always involve shit food. Of course that gives you anxiety. It requires planning. A fixation on healthy or clean eating. Now, not only are these definitions vague, but they're made by people that don't know what the fuck they're talking about. This is the National Eating Disorder Collaboration. It's an Australian group. And yeah, fasting, binge eating, skipping meals, avoiding types of food, okay. And I'll even grant you vomiting, laxative diuretics, enemas, sure, extreme. But then you get to steroids and creatine use. You kids and your creatine and your disordered eating, using diet pills. Yeah, I can imagine my fat aunt that's never stepped foot in a gym eating expired fen-phen to lose weight. That's disordered. That should be put in a special category. But Jesus Christ, if you use these tools as part of a deliberate, mechanical, predictable system that requires discipline and knowledge and learning to improve your status, it's going to get that box checked all the same. Now, it's important to know that disordered eating and eating disorders are not the same. Like I said, disordered eating is something that is used as part of an eating disorder criteria, but it's got to reach a certain frequency and extreme, and you would like to think that analysis sifts through the people that are regular bodybuilders, but this is not being created by people that spend their life in the gym. This is being created by sedentary academics. Now, if we go back here, this isn't a study he's referencing. This is an article that starts out, it's feared 1 in 10 men training in UK gyms could have a condition which can lead to depression, steroid abuse, and even suicide. And the research around suicide is similarly flimsy. They will say there's an alarming rate of suicide amongst people with muscle dysmorphia. Well, this particular study took 63 men with some body dysmorphic disorder and gave them questionnaires to sift out if there was muscle dysmorphia in there. 14 men with muscle dysmorphia. Now, of the 63 men, 6 to 8 cases had insufficient details to allow diagnostic certainty. So they had to make a forced choice decision in these instances, which means flipping a fucking coin. Now we're going to constantly come back to, okay, what's the threshold for excessive and how many people does that unintentionally include? Here it says features of body dysmorphic disorders such as excessive weightlifting operationalizes more than 1 hour a day. We're dealing with statistics that are so sloppy that see people as training more than 1 hour a day as having a trait of body dysmorphic disorders. Now, that doesn't mean it's enough to diagnose you, but you can see how messy these numbers are when this is how they're setting criteria in order to figure out if somebody actually has a diagnosable condition.
Estimated that the prevalence of muscle dysphoria was 5.9% among college students and between 13.6% and 44% among male weightlifters. Why is there such a large gap between the actual numbers? Well, partly because it isn't being talked about enough, but also because it's very hard to identify.
Okay. How does something not being talked about affect your ability to measure it? They're giving people questionnaires that are designed to identify a particular disorder. Now, as far as it being hard to identify, exactly, for the reasons we just said. It's the same problem psychology has with trying to define things like happiness. Are we talking about joy? Are we talking about elation and ecstasy? Just being content? What is happiness? These are hard questions, and they're very important when you're actually trying to measure the thing. If you cannot define something precisely, you cannot fucking measure it, and that makes it hard to identify. But what he's doing is assuming the problem is as bad as he thinks it is, and even giving it more leeway on the upper end in order to say, well, there's people that aren't talking about it yet, so there's gotta be more, bro. The gap exists because of a fundamental problem with the science. The science cannot account for these definition problems, so there are nonsense measurements that come in. That doesn't mean that you make assumptions about how bad it really is. That means you apply skepticism, which says, this field isn't really cooked yet. We're not really that good at pulling out meaningful information. Let's hold off on reporting these. But that's not the era we live in. Everybody who has a video essay to make will take the most flimsiest of data because having a number gives it a sciencey sheen and makes it look like rigor was applied to your video. Explains the entire replication crisis in psychology. If any of you guys have read self-help books or like pop psychology books over the last like 25 years, some of the most popular axioms and studies and truisms that have been repeated in these books over and over and over have been found to be bullshit because they were never replicated. It was flimsy work that if you applied some rigor and repeated them over and over, you found the results were inconsistent. That applies to things like the marshmallow experiment. That applies to like the Dunning-Kruger effect. There's a whole list of things that you have to throw in the wastebasket that have been ingrained in our lexicon because of this lazy ass bullshit. This is not how science is done.
Because I was one of those men too. So let's try to shine some light on this under-researched realm of body dysmorphia and explore why bigorexia is on the rise. In order to understand how we got here, we must first understand where this crisis started: the world of competitive bodybuilding. Bodybuilding as a sport and resistance training solely for the purpose of improving one's aesthetics wasn't popularized until the 1940s, when contests like Mr. America and Mr. Universe put more eyes on the scene. The contestants' physiques, though nothing crazy to our current generation, were seen as abnormally large during this time. But this level of impressive physique was about to be inflated forever with the introduction of one drug: steroids. Anabolic steroids are a synthetic derivative of testosterone designed to enhance the hormone's muscle-building properties. In the 1970s, bodybuilding reached what is known as the golden era and hit the mainstream through the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Frank Zane, and Dorian Yates, all of whom used steroids regularly. It exposed an entire generation of fitness enthusiasts to a new level of physique, but it wouldn't be seen as a desirable or achievable level of physique for many years to come. You see, during this time, bodybuilders were still seen as genetic freaks. On Muscle Beach, a public gym that most of the biggest bodybuilders in the scene went to, people would view the likes of Arnold and Frank as a spectacle. More than anything, outrageously huge bodybuilders clearly taking some kind of performance-enhancing drugs were like zoo animals. A fun thing to look at, but not something that most kids would look up to.
There's going to be a problem with young kids making retrospectives about cultures they didn't experience because they're going to miss a lot of really vital context. I think this guy's in his late 20s. I think he was born in the late 90s. I was born in 86 and I watched just a fuck ton of movies and TV around that time. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was the biggest, most influential action figure of the era. And he wasn't stage ready Arnold from the 70s, but he was almost bigger. He was girthier because he didn't have to diet down. He was known by everybody as just being big as shit. His arms were like over 20 inches. He was a big motherfucker and he was everywhere. In fact, let's see. All right, so let's look at Arnie's filmography, all right? He had a few things. He did Pumping Iron, which put him on the map. And then through the 80s, Conan the Barbarian, anybody? The Destroyer, the first Terminator, Red Sonja. That's back when women were jacked. What happened to that? You got Gal Gadot, who looked like she's never done a fucking push-up, as the softest woman on Themyscira. Brie Larson's Captain Marvel. Like back in the day, you had Bridget Nielsen, you had Sigourney Weaver, Linda Hamilton. Mid-80s, man, jacked women were in. Commando, Raw Deal, Predator, The Running Man, Red Heat, Twins, Total Recall, Kindergarten Cop, Terminator 2. All through the 80s and 90s, banger after banger. Last Action Hero, that movie sucked, but I still loved it as a kid. Junior, Buff Arnold Giving Birth, all the way up, and he's getting like close to his 50s at this point. Eraser, Batman and Robin as Mr. Freeze. So you have Arnold at his biggest and most influential through the mid 80s to mid 90s. So it's a bit disingenuous to talk about bodybuilders through the 70s, through the golden era, as being freak shows. No, they weren't really influencing anybody yet. And there's going to be a lot of talk here about movies, but for some reason, no talk about sports, which I don't understand, because the physiques of top athletes hasn't really changed in like 50 years. And I think that pokes a massive hole in everything he's about to say.
But now that steroids were starting to hit the mainstream, the doors of opportunity to raise the standards of what was considered a great physique were wide open. The portrayal of masculinity in pop culture and other forms of media has always had a firm grip on young men. Before we know who we are or who we want to become, we have always looked to those ideals presented to us to give us direction. Usually these ideals offer more positives than negatives, but in the case of outwardly appearances, it's reaching the ends of extreme. What is considered a strong male physique in movies, for example, has evolved quite a bit over the years. In the 90s, one might have considered Brad Pitt in Fight Club to be absolutely jacked, but if we fast forward 7 years, we can see how our desire for more muscle reflected itself in the movie male physique. I remember seeing Gerard Butler's physique in the movie 300 when it came out in 2006. I was only 9 years old at the time, but I do remember thinking that a body like that was completely unattainable, only reserved for dramatic depictions of life.
I saw Fight Club on opening night. I remember the media buzz around Brad being jacked. Now, he doesn't have an excessive amount of muscle here. The dude just has kind of wide shoulders and narrow waist, and he's super lean. He has those identifiable Brad Pitt kind of weird abs that make him look a little more textured, make him look a little more hard body than he probably deserves to be. But the guy's selling this like this is the prototypical body type in the 90s. It wasn't. He's weirdly neglecting Schwarzenegger's iconic film role. 90s action movies were filled with guys who were bodied up. Brad Pitt being shirtless in this and then like Legend of the Falls was not somehow more iconic or influential than Arnold Schwarzenegger's entire fucking repertoire. This is not the physique of the 90s. This was just a physique. And similarly, we're doing this thing where we're calling Gerard Butler's physique freakish and unattainable. He's going off his 9-year-old intuition. I think that's just unattainable. When you're 9, you think everything's unattainable. Your opinion on the matter doesn't fucking matter. The reality is, Gerard Butler right here is not more jacked than Steve Reeves was. Guys, this is Steve Reeves in the fucking 1940s. This is before steroids were readily accessible. Yes, they were invented in the 30s. Disposable needles weren't even invented until the 50s, and the Soviet sports system didn't start using testosterone until the 50s. So Steve Reeves in the 40s, I'm sorry, American physique guys were not ahead of the Soviet sports machine. I hate to break it to you and burst your bubble. This is a natty physique, and there was a fraction of the competitive talent pool that exists now. So when you look at Steve Reeves years later in Hercules, like if you colorize this and spray paint abs on him, this dude is bigger and more jacked than Gerard Butler is. Yes, spray painted abs. I know it's shocking that the movie that's based on an epic fantasy graphic novel with god kings and monsters that used heavy CGI, I know that it's shocking they used some trickery. But right here, Gerard Butler's 6'2" and under 200 pounds. That is not a monumental physique. And again, I keep bringing up sports because if there's any kid that was like a sports fan, they're not going to look at this and be like, oh my God, that's incredible. If you're like a nerd and the only thing that you consume are drama kids that grow up and become actors on screen, yeah, you are going to have a skewed idea of what the ideal male body is because it's going to be defined by drama kids. And Gerard Butler's one movie in 2007 where he looked kind of jacked is not more influential than this long, epic list of just banger after banger. Man, I'm getting torqued looking at this. Now, the whole thing about unreasonably jacked celebrities has bothered me for a long time because I think it's just massively fucking overblown. Like, if I ask you to tell me the biggest celebrity, it's going to be The Rock. And The Rock is big and he's jacked. He's by far the most popular. I don't think The Rock is like an epic improvement on Arnold. He's leaner than Arnold was when he was making movies. He's a bit more shredded. I think Arnold was bigger. I don't know. They're both bigger than any average dude would even think of trying to get. But to go past The Rock, you got to go to like Batista and John Cena, a lot of wrestlers. Again, wrestling's been around forever and they've been big as shit forever. But those guys aren't as influential or popular. So once you get to the most popular ones, you're talking about Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, Henry Cavill. I'm going to give it to you. Hemsworth in Love and Thunder was a specimen. Yeah, dude probably would have been a good physique competitor. This is good genes. I'm sure he trained his ass off. And of course, there's probably drugs in the mix. Let's talk about Captain America. Yeah, he got kind of jacked for Captain America. Let's talk about Captain America. Yeah, he looks kind of jacked right there. Yeah, everybody loves this one. This is like where he looked the most jacked. He was like curling the helicopter. I mean, is Chris Evans more jacked than Steve Reeves was in Hercules like 70 fucking years ago? And Henry Cavill looks pretty damn good. He has a good amount of muscle and he's pretty lean and he has a frame. But once again, I'm going to call this an athlete's build. Anybody who's played sports for a long time or watched sports for a very long time is not floored by this physique. This isn't like the limits of human hypertrophy being displayed on screen, presented as if this is the ideal you should be chasing. These are guys that have the build of exceptional athletes, which is literally what they're playing on screen. They're playing superhuman people. And I would also say that a lot of the guys you think are uber jacked, unreasonably jacked, actually aren't. They just have good frames, broad shoulders, small hips. They're tall. They have a reasonable amount of muscle mass, but very low body fat. Now that's important because gaining excess muscle is very difficult. Changing your frame is impossible. Sorry, guys. If you're 5'8", I don't know what you're doing looking at Jason Momoa like, oh, is that a realistic physique for me? But everybody can control their body fat. Muscle mass is not linearly gained. It's very punctuated. You get long periods of stagnation. It's very hard to do. Everybody can tweak their diet right now to lose 1 to 2 pounds of body fat. 24 weeks of that, and you're going to lose anywhere from 24 to 48 pounds of body fat. Everybody could get lean. That should be the most empowering thing. This guy is not a freak of muscle. He has a good amount of muscle, but this is long before the steroid era, long before there were corporate gyms filled with barbells and dumbbells. This guy stands out because he has a good amount of muscle, but he's fucking shredded. This is Bobby Pandor. You can look at, of course, Eugene Sandow. As far as the amount of sheer muscle mass he has, he wouldn't stand out on like a junior college wrestling team. But it's the fact that he's shredded, he's peeled, he has no body fat. Everybody can get their body fat down and everybody looks good with very, very little body fat. So given that natty dudes in the 1800s who are not hypertrophy specialists, who are not getting paid millions of dollars to portray supernatural gods and heroes and beings from other worlds, I'm just not sympathetic about the case that's being made about jacked Hollywood ruining kids' self-esteem. Look, Jason Momoa's got a great physique, but there are a billion guys at Lake Havasu in the summer that look like this dude. He's tall, broad shoulders, little soft here, looks like he used to play sports. You look at him here for a multi-million-dollar movie role, he just dieted down, he got his waist down, and he caught a pump. This is more muscle mass than the average bear is going to have, but it's not breaking the mold, and it's certainly not a massive improvement on what was shown on the screen over the last 7 decades of filmmaking. Look at Alexander Skarsgård, the Northman. This guy's a beast, but I think he's a beast because he's, 8 feet fucking tall. The thing is, if you're like 6'4" and you have the build of a swimmer, if you have broad shoulders, this physique is probably very attainable to you. But if you reflexively see a line in the deltoid and abs and think steroids, you haven't been around long enough to really have an opinion. Now, there's something else that kind of supports my case, and that is that we're seeing a lot of jacked people in films because the most popular films right now are superhero films. It's a fantasy of these godlike people. Of course, they have to have godlike physiques. I don't think we see in anime or among the droves of comic book fans people having a lot of body dysmorphic issues because they're constantly consuming illustrations, artwork, representations of the most freakish physiques possible, because the average person has an understanding about the difference between fantasy and reality. Now, if we go away from superhero movies and just go to action movies, look at the top performers of all time. We got the Fast and the Furious. I mean, is this giving people body image issues right here? I mean, if you're 35% body fat like most Americans are, almost definitely. But I don't think, even once we get into later installments with The Rock, I don't think we have kids breaking themselves to go to the gym because they feel like getting swole is a must. So we go down, you got Top Gun, Maverick, Tom Cruise. I love me some Tom Cruise. His 55-year-old crazy ass. He's 5'6", running around doing his own stunts. More Fast and Furious. You got James Bond, Mission Impossible, more Tom Cruise. Indiana Jones, more James Bond. Hobbs and Shaw, all right. You got Jacked Rock, front and center. Okay, I'll give you that one, but we're at number 10 already. And as we go down, more Mission Impossible, more James Bond. You get down to Sherlock Holmes, for fuck's sake. Yep, there's 300. John Wick, fucking Matt Damon and Jason Bourne. I mean, come on, the Kingsman. Even if we go to the superhero movies, I mean, look at what we're seeing here. Chris Evans has got a good physique. Chris Hemsworth is kind of nutty. But look, you got Mark Ruffalo. You got Ant-Man. You got War Machine. You got Hawkeye. Brie Larson infamously had like no physique for her role. Anthony Mackie and Chadwick Boseman were like fit. Doctor Strange wasn't especially jacked. I mean, for a superhero movie, I would actually say the representation of like unreasonably jacked people was kind of measured. The X-Men movies, the only jacked X-Man was Wolverine. And we're going to get to him. Believe you me.
Good. Butler reported in interviews that he was working out for 6 hours a day, quote, ruining his body just to maintain that level of physique.
All right, Gerard Butler was working out for 6 hours a day. because he was not a recreational lifter or athlete his entire life. He's an actor. He's an adult pretender. Remember Christian Bale had to lose a shit ton of weight to play the machinist where he was like anorexic, and then he had to bulk up to play like Dick Cheney in Vice? Their transformations are impressive because they do them in very short periods of time, and that's mainly what the steroids do if they do take them, which they probably do. It's not that you can't get this physique without gear, because that's absolutely fucking stupid. It's that you can't get it in the 4-month window that they had to go from one role where they needed to play a 130-pound Holocaust survivor to the next one where they needed to be stacked and jacked. I'm pretty sure Josh Brett cited the same article, and it's so fucking stupid. Going to the gym as part of a long-term plan to change your body, it takes 6 to 8 hours a week. It's not breaking the bank, it's not consuming your life, and it's not wearing your body into the ground. And if somebody's coming up to me with a $20 million contract to gain as much earthly muscle as I can in the next 3 months, I will ruin my fucking body. This messaging is so fucked. It's like, yeah, people are going to try to look like Gerard Butler and they're going to have to ruin their body to do it, which is just absolute garbage. Like, this is such disingenuous shit.
Completely unrealistic lifestyle for the average person. Still, this was a movie where a lot of young men looked up to the main character, and many of them began working out in the hopes that they could one day look like Gerard Butler. How do you think an ideal like that affects the mental health of an adolescent boy? In extreme scenarios, they spend all their time lifting weights, revolving their life around the gym and eating healthy, disregarding any other areas of development. And when their efforts always come up short, their self-esteem plummets, never being satisfied with how they look, despite looking better than most kids their age.
This is some impressive creative writing. So you have young boys that see things they want to aspire to that require ambition. So they just trash their schoolwork, they ignore their friends, they stop showering, and they just work day in, day out to do the thing. And then, of course, when you work obsessively towards a singular goal, of course you fall short, and then you feel bad. Actually, what overwhelmingly happens is the opposite, is that people go to the gym, it usually gives a bunch of positives, boosts their self-esteem, grounds them in physical activity, and puts them in charge of their body. And they also get a social network around it, and it reinforces itself. And oh, by the way, it takes like an hour and a half, like 3 or 4 times a week. So they just go about living the rest of their lives because every college athlete still has to keep their grades up, and every bodybuilder and powerlifter still has to have a fucking day job. Now, I know the type that he's talking about, the person that's hopeless and they see all kinds of consequences, and that person experiences things the way they do because everything they do is rooted in some greater dysfunction that's also going to fuck up any other domain they might go into. Consider the type he's talking about is probably somebody that's on social media too much because their parents gave them access to Instagram when they were 8 fucking years old. For this kid to feel like they have to get that jack to be okay, they probably think that like their relationship status hinges on it, or all the problems in their life hinge on it, which shows a lack of perspective. Anybody who actually exists in a community around real people understands that real people don't hold them to those standards. You can go into any H-E-B in Texas, go into any fucking Walmart, and you're going to see who is able to couple up and reproduce. You don't need to be an Instagram 8 to get a girl. You need to exist in a community around real people. Now, if this type of kid also goes on to disregard other areas of development, that tells you there's a deeper problem than the existence of gym culture. He doesn't know how to set goals, how to plan, how to prioritize, how to balance different things. And that is a fatal flaw in your game that will keep you anxious, poor, and short of your potential in any domain you go into. Now, if this kid also had his efforts come up short, it also means that he wasn't consistent, wasn't trying very hard. Newbies can hit their head against a wall and still grow, so you really have to fuck up to come up short. And again, it shows a deeper problem. It's wanting something and feeling entitled to get it without expecting yourself to learn and grow and get a handle on this process. That's a backwards, dysfunctional, lazy-ass American consumer way of looking at the world where you think that anything you want, you should be able to DoorDash. Now, maybe he thinks his efforts came up short because he does have such unrealistic expectations, and that cuts to the crux of all this. Expectations are yours. They're not other people's. And you, as a consumer, as somebody that voluntarily engages with all of this content, has to be accountable for your unrealistic expectations. Instead, we pretend like it's not the consumer's job to have any knowledge or authority before they form strong opinions about things, and that it's the job of the powers that be to conserve them and only feed them content that's good for them, that's adjusted just so to their tolerances. It's more utopian thinking. And the bottom line is, if that fantasy world is what you need to be okay, you are never going to be okay. This is the embodiment of teach a man to fish. You can give a kid this perfect artificial social media feed and remove all societal pressures, which of course you can't fucking do, and Maybe they'll be okay, but probably not, because that's not how human psychology works. Or you can just give them the tools and teach them how to not be a fragile frump of nothing in an era where there are more tools, more opportunity to do anything and be anything you want to be than the entire history of mankind. You ever find yourself confused by the complexity of programming? I know I struggled like crazy in my early strongman career. There was just too much advice, and every decision I made felt like a guess. As soon as I hit a snag in any program, I would have no idea what to do, so I would inevitably bail. It took me years of training and coaching to figure out how to predictably increase muscle and strength, both in myself and others. And those lessons took me to my own showings in World's Strongest Man, America's Strongest Man, and the Arnold in the 231-pound weight class. This is why we made BaseStrengthAI, to give clear, direct, and personalized instruction right in the middle of your workout in real time. BaseStrengthAI features 3 programs: Block, 70s Powerlifter, and Bullmastiff, each one inspired by the work ethic and programming of the biggest and strongest bodybuilders, powerlifters, and strongmen throughout history. These templates originated in my book Base Strength, and they can be ran as is, but with BaseStrengthAI, weight and volume are prescribed to you on your specific feedback, and that's personalization that even an online coach can't replicate. This gives you the absolute certainty that every rep is meaningful, that every block of training is getting you closer to your goals. It's my programming, but it's your program. Get the heart of old school training with the intelligence of a coach right in your back pocket. Head now to basestrength.com.
Concluded that action figures have become more muscular and larger over the past 25 years. Another piece of pop culture, James Bond, saw its most recent actor, Daniel Craig, boasting a much bulkier physique than Sean Connery's James Bond in the 1960s.
You gotta be absolutely fucking kidding me here. This is the Havasu physique I talked about. This is what happens when every high school cornerback takes up a sales job and stops working out for a few years. This is a worse physique than an average college swimmer. Like seriously, these are guys that spend 2 to 3 hours a day in a fucking pool. These are not hypertrophy specialists. This is supposed to be a point in favor of bigorexia becoming a problem. Here's the real deception of Hollywood, guys. It's not showing you Daniel Craig sporting the physique of a retired alcoholic dirt bike rider in his portrayal of an overpowered international super spy. The real deception is when Hollywood was just dominated by drama kids and dancers, and they tried to sell you that this is actually the physique of somebody that can do all of the incredible things that said overpowered international super spy would be able to do. Historically, actors playing these superpowered action heroes have been untrained atrophy drama kids, but actual athletes, people that have to perform, they've looked that way for a very long time. So this is not muscle inflation. This is actually a reasonable market correction.
Just about every form of media that had an attractive male star saw their muscular ideals grow in size as our culture continuously pushed the standard for what is considered strong and beautiful.
All right, I'm not gonna lie, Zac Efron was fucking jacked too. But we're back to the same exact spot though. He doesn't have an exceptional amount of muscle mass. He got very, very lean. And when he talks about how difficult it was to prepare for this role, it's because getting this lean, it's doable by everybody. It's just very hard. Like here he looks like a fucking superhero.
Mostly pushed the standard for what
But I mean, watch American Ninja Warrior. There's 20 guys that look like this.
What is considered strong and beautiful. And a lot of these actors are accused of using steroids to enhance their physique and reach that standard. This is not necessarily a problem on its own. Actors want to be extremely dedicated to their roles, and steroids might allow them to do that without having too many side effects, so long as they keep the dose low and get off of it when filming is over. But many actors often lie about the drugs they are taking, making it seem like their physiques are attainable without any performance-enhancing drugs.
Did he juice? Did he take steroids?
No, I love my job and I love Wolverine. I got to be careful what I say here, but I had been told anecdotally what the side effects are of that, and I was like, I don't love it that much.
Again,
while it's not 100% confirmed, most fitness experts believe he took PEDs. I think this is a weird example to use. I mean, I would bet money he did take PEDs, again, not because you can't get this physique natty, but because he probably had a very short period of time to do it. Early Wolverine was not a specimen. I mean, Hugh Jackman was younger there. Again, singer, dancer, actor, this is what you get. But as this franchise took off and it became the biggest moneymaker for him, of course, he leaned into the role and he steadily got more jacked as time went on. Now, what his life was like while filming other things, did he go through spurts? I doubt he was just evenly training the whole time. He was probably doing punctuated preps for these movies. I would say, yeah, he probably took gear because you go from 0 to 60 a bit faster, and that's exactly what actors do as they go from role to role. Now, what you're seeing here is a good physique, but again, he's lean. It's not an unreasonable amount of muscle. He's not as jacked as Natty Steve Reeves was in the 1940s. He's not as shredded as Bobby Pandor was around 1900. In this picture, he's 6'2", reportedly, under 200 pounds. Body fat, he's probably around 10%, 10 to 12%. If Hugh Jackman decided to shred down to do a bodybuilding show to get ready, he'd probably have to lose another 10 pounds of fat. You're talking about 6'2", 185 pounds on stage. That's a big dude. It's a decent amount of muscle. He's going to have a good physique, but he's not blowing anybody's fucking mind. And natty bodybuilding shows are filled with those physiques. Everybody remember this from like 10 years ago? Is this giving you body dysmorphia? Is this just blowing your mind as to the limit of human potential? If anything, you should feel bad because he's stronger than you, honestly, not because he's lean. Man, bitches can't hear anything under 500 pounds. Know what I'm saying? So the whole thing about attainable physiques is abject nonsense because, one, it's being decided by people that have no authority or experience to determine what is attainable. Even experts can't look at you and say, this is exactly what you're going to be able to do, because the only physique you're entitled to is yours, with your genetics, your frame, and your resources. The fact is that the people at the top that have the genetics that predispose them to looking so exceptional that they get paid millions of dollars to display it on screen probably are working with tools that you aren't. So if you do go into this thinking that, holy hell, I could do that, I should start training just to look like that, that's kind of like assuming that you can get on American Idol. It's immature and you need to grow the fuck up. But of course, the extreme physiques we're talking about are physiques like Schwarzenegger or The Rock or the most extreme people that have the most amount of mass. The physiques you see in the likes of a Chris Evans or a Hugh Jackman or a Chris Pratt, they are actually closer to being down to earth, and they are not bad goals to shoot for, but it does require you spending 5 to 10 years seriously pursuing it. To say that that is too much for people to be exposed to is to say that the only representation that won't give you a complex is that which requires no ambition.
Again, this perpetuates a masculine ideal that is becoming increasingly more difficult to live up to. And when men find the masculine ideal is farther and farther from their reach, two things will happen. They will either go to extreme measures to get as close to that unrealistic ideal, taking dangerous supplements, ruining both their physical and mental health in the process, or they will give up on the idea of looking like that completely and tell themselves that they will never be good looking enough to deserve acknowledgement and validation.
God, I reject like all of that. Ideals are out of reach for everybody. That's what makes them ideals. It is like an imaginary fixed North Star that you chase to. If you're a Christian, you believe that everybody's a sinner and you're chasing like the perfect representation of Christ that you will never achieve. It is the fixation on the ideal that keeps you moving forward. And most of the world can keep working forward towards something without being perfect or being the top 1% of 1%. Without having a complex or getting suicidal over it. And that's really important because to be worthwhile in any field, you have to be satisfied with failures, with falling short, because that's how you learn. It is a process over a lifetime. Now, I'm going back to the masculine ideals. There's a lot of them. It's not just some, there's a lot. And where most people live their actual real life, they are not coming face to face with the need to be super jacked. They're coming face to face with the need to have friends, to have status, to be influential, to make money, to earn, to have a plan, to be intelligent, to be funny or charismatic. It is a bigger masculine ideal to have a good job, know a trade, or earn money so that you can actually take care of yourself and not be a deadbeat, but also help take care of the people close to you. That's probably the pinnacle of masculine ideal.
But there is one form of media that has wreaked more havoc and done more damage than any other forms of media that have existed in the past few decades. And that is, unsurprisingly, social media. I just so happened to be getting into fitness and bodybuilding when I was in college in 2015, right when the first real fitness influencers were blowing up. Guys like Sean Thompson and Christian Guzman became figures that I looked up to as a teenager because they were very relatable and transparent about what it took to look like them. I began setting up a workout routine that revolved around my studies and social life. When I'd go to the dining hall, I'd make sure to add a few extra slices of pork or chicken to my plate, and soon I was beginning to see my first glimpses of those noob gains, as they're called. The progress was addicting. It was the first time in my life where I felt like I had complete control over the results I was getting in something, and that positively translated into other areas of my life. I had more energy, I felt more confident in social settings, and my discipline was easier to call upon.
This is what most people feel when they start training, which is why gym culture has just steadily increased in popularity over the years. It's an overwhelmingly net positive, especially in the face of modernity, which involves people doing what I'm doing, sitting in a chair their entire day, eating whatever the fuck they want, having their bodies go to shit. So having something that not just grounds you in physical activity, but it connects you to all this other good shit, makes you feel like you're in control, connects you to a social network. It improves the way others see and interact with you. It's like overwhelmingly good, which is one of the reasons I hate this type of essay, is because the thing killing Americans and most people in the Western world is not bigorexia. It's just not. It doesn't fucking register. It's still obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. So anything that focuses on the extremes, the outliers, and starts sounding the alarms to make a video, the dark side of fitness, I can't take it seriously. Alcohol kills a fuck ton of people. The dangers of party culture, the instances of date rape or of overdosing in colleges because of alcohol. In 40 years, there isn't going to be an epidemic of adults dying because they took SARMs when they were 19. But in 40 years, there will have been hundreds of thousands of deaths tallied up directly from alcohol. So we know the things that kill people. We know the things that are just taking people out left and right in society. And gym culture, a fixation on training and taking care of your body, is a net positive in every possible way that you look at it. So this is from Menno Henselmans, a guy that is just balls deep in all of the research regarding fitness and hypertrophy and even steroid use. On average, doped athletes live longer still a little bit than the general population and than their siblings. Steroid usage definitely reduces your lifespan, and the specific damage seems to be about the equivalent to the positives you would normally get if you lived a very healthy lifestyle with a lot of exercise and good nutrition, staying at a low body fat level, having good body composition, and generally living a very healthy life. I guess a lot of people were surprised that steroid users weren't dropping dead after a single cycle. But the downside is that just occasional moderate usage already reduces your lifespan pretty much back to that of the average person with a generally very crappy lifestyle. So what that seems to mean is that the good qualities that come with living a life in the gym, chasing physique goals and everything else, actually gives you an edge on the general population, even if you're taking steroids. Now, of course, context is important, and I hate the people that analyze steroid usage because they apply no context. The dangerous stuff that skews the life expectancy results comes from bodybuilders who take an immense amount of drugs over a very long time. It is very expensive and very time consuming to kill yourself with steroids. That's not to say there aren't risks or there aren't downsides, but there are people that literally believe teenagers are dropping dead from steroids, which is just factually incorrect. In fact, let's try something. What happens when I put teenager dies from steroid use? You can tell I've been here before. Taylor Hooton, 17. So Taylor Hooton took his own life. He didn't die from a heart attack or stroke or something else physiologically caused by the steroids. He was depressed. He was suicidal. Now, to what degree steroids played a role, we'll never know. But steroids do not have the unique power of making somebody who's perfectly mentally healthy suddenly become suicidal. So this was not a heart attack or a stroke. This also happened way back in 2003. This is 22 years old, and that is the first thing that pops up when you put teenager dies from steroids. Now, I'm not saying all this to be an advocate for steroids, that kids should be on them, that there aren't risks. What I'm saying is that when you're evaluating risk, it becomes tricky. If I ask you to write an essay on driving being dangerous, you would immediately start being critical of driving. You would consider all of the context. What makes it more dangerous? What makes it less dangerous? Well, driving kills a lot of people. What happens if everybody stops driving? Oh, actually, there's a lot of fucking trade-offs that might be more dangerous. The simple fact is, the thing that is killing people in the modern world is not anything that looks like what we are talking about here. And being hyperbolic when it comes to the consequence of body image and taking this hyperbolic position on steroids ignores the reality of what the actual fucking risks are. So I don't have a lot of intellectual respect for any of this.
But when the social media fitness industry really started gaining traction through mediums like Instagram, that's when my self-esteem started to take a dip again. Only this time, it stemmed from an expectation I could never reach. As the fitness industry continued to reach new heights in revenue every year, more and more teens were being exposed to the lifestyles of fitness addicts on social media. Extreme fat loss routines, how to bulk up fast, the one exercise that will blow up your chest. These were the type of engaging titles that got clicks and drew the most attention. My fitness regimen began to evolve with it. I was now around 2 years into my bodybuilding journey, and I built a respectable physique for myself. And so, with the influence of these influencers, I started an Instagram account in the hopes of becoming a fitness figure myself. A lot of you still don't know this, but for several years, my entire brand and this YouTube channel revolved around fitness and bodybuilding content. With 2 social media accounts dedicated to this, it became ingrained into my identity. And because of that, everything I did had to be in alignment with my bodybuilding goals.
Yeah, Haas, that's called having ambitious goals and trying to make something your career. He just described what it takes to become an influencer, an authority on something. If you want to make social media your career, you're not just some kid who's desperate to get laid. He set his sights very high, and I'm trying to figure out where the sympathy is supposed to come from. Like, take become fitness influencer and swap it out for pass the bar exam or make it through residency. Again, the masculine archetype is having high professional careers or some trade, having some job that gives you security, having some usefulness and ability to provide to the people around you. The masculine ideal of being jacked is not more valued than the masculine ideal of earning a high income or being a provider. You did something hard and you're just describing the steps it took. Now he's talking about social media, and I will absolutely say that social media is the big problem here. And the reason I give special treatment to social media over something like movies or sports or anything else is because of how much of your life it does consume. In the back of the day, people used to watch like 8 hours of TV a week. Now people have 8 hours of screen time a day because their fucking phone is always on them, and they use it to turn their brains off and mindlessly scroll Instagram. And every single person that had a hand in developing social media knows exactly what they were trying to do. They were trying to hack the human brainstem to keep attention. And the way they do that is by fucking with your relationship with stimulus. So it's the same science of running slot machines. They knew they were doing this. They knew that it was unethical. And that's why you immediately had a bunch of people coming out and disavowing the technology that they helped bring about. Social media absolutely has this effect on people. But this goes back to what are realistic solutions. Social media engagement is voluntary. You watch the things you want to watch, and you can't expect the powers that be to just give you things that they think are good for you while you will continue to fight against them anyways. You have to take responsibility. And that means you either curate your social media feed, you limit your screen time, or log off altogether, understanding that it gives nothing good to your life, but costs a lot. More importantly than that, you trade it for real human interaction, because the more you exist in real communities, the more this bullshit has no effect on. There are real solutions here, and it's not appealing to more mid-level physiques represented on social media. I mean, for fuck's sake, AI is a thing. Half the physiques you see aren't even real. So the basic consumer understanding, well, most of this shit is made up anyway, should be enough for people to bypass the self-esteem issue. So I don't know why we're not fixating on that messaging.
Promoting your physique on social media is not inherently bad. When it's accompanied with some inspiration and good advice, it can actually be a huge force for good and influence people to pursue healthier lifestyle.
And I agree with that. There's good to be had. I'm just trying to figure out what makes a representation of a really good physique healthy and something to aspire to versus something that's going to eat away at your self-esteem. I mean, why is Hugh Jackman or Chris Pratt's physique transformations problematic and a pipeline to bigorexia, but some fitness influencers are healthy or good? Like, what determines that? Guess we'll never know.
With some inspiration and good advice, it can actually be a huge force for good and influence people to pursue healthier lifestyles. The problem, which amplifies the rise of bigorexia, comes in when you have thousands of influencers promoting their physiques, which can only be attained using performance-enhancing drugs that claim they are natural just to sell more of their products and supplements. Yeah, bro, you can totally look like me. I haven't been shooting needles in my ass. All I've been doing is using my 10-week workout protocol that's linked in my bio. Oh, also what's in there is my brand new supplement line, comprised of a few herbs mentioned in a Andrew Huberman podcast.
Okay, low-hanging fruit. Everybody thinks the Liver King's a dildo. Obviously, it's not great to lie about shit. I still think the idea of the damage being done by the Liver King, who is overwhelmingly known as a clown, is minimal. If anything, he was like probably the greatest fucking cautionary tale that the natty community globbed onto to sell their message. But people love to fixate on Mike O'Hearn. But again, there's millions of people in athletics all over the world that have rare genetics that without touching a steroid would look better than you ever could. And in a world without steroids, you would have to contend with the existence of them. So if you can live in a world where genetically superior people have physiques you could never attain and you could be expected to be okay, it should make no difference if people are using steroids, whether Mike O'Hearn is natty or not, or if they're swapping their limbs or taking fucking chemical cocktails that make them grow wings and fly around and shoot lasers out of their ass. Your perception of a world where people don't lie about steroids or they just don't take it at all, it doesn't exist, you still aren't in a better position than the world you live in now.
Now, for people online who would have had what is considered to be a great physique a couple decades ago is insane. There are teenagers getting their self-esteem and confidence destroyed by posting their fitness results after a few years because they don't look like the 1% that mostly get highlighted on social media. Or even if they aren't teenagers and just have a really good average physique, those guys are getting eaten up in the comments too.
Yeah, if you take a lot of really intimate photos of yourself and throw it on the internet, the comments are going to come for you. I think at this point, everybody understands the lay of the land with social media. The comments stay vicious. You should not go on social media expecting only positive feedback. That's absolutely insane. And I wouldn't want a social media where that's the only thing that exists because that's toxic and dysfunctional in the other way. And also, most of the shit on social media, yeah, it's filtered, it's fabricated. There's a lot of AI. Filters have been a thing for a very long time. This is something that people know, like you don't use without being aware of these things. So when all is said and done, if you're against things that are artificial, log the fuck off of social media. YouTube is great. YouTube is long form. This is where you go for educational discussion and to learn how to do shit and to get motivation. Instagram is absolutely not. Instagram is a cancer. So the only mental health issues are going to come from people that have too much goddamn screen time. So cut the screen time.
Post pictures of celebrities with what they think is a dad bod, which is really just a dude in very good shape that isn't totally shredded. Just a couple decades ago, this guy would have been considered an absolute monster. But now, dad bod.
Yeah, women's specific feedback on physiques is like one of the most unreliable things in the world. I don't know, the guy's in very good shape. I mean, the guy has a good amount of muscle. That's a good amount of muscle. He's got pretty big arms, probably an off-season bodybuilder. Who knows? He has love handles. The guy's probably 20% body fat. That's not very good shape. It's better than 30%, which is most fat Americans, but it's not very good shape. If she was used to dating like swimmers or fucking BMX riders or somebody that just has 9% body fat, because those are his tweaker white jeans that he has, the guy could have had spindly little arms, but if he looked like Brad Pitt in Fight Club, she might think that that's in shape. That's more conditioned, it's more detailed, so there's more at stake than being a monster versus being very good shape. There's different physiques, people have different preferences. The guy right here, by anybody who's involved in fitness culture, he's a little fat, and I say that as somebody who's way fatter than him.
Checks out with the other scientific literature we have, as it's been shown that a greater total screen time was associated with greater symptoms of muscle dysphoria in both men and women. As a result, in the past few years, we have now seen more and more stories of teenagers trying a bunch of different substances and drugs, either being indifferent or ignorant to their side effects, just so they can look like their favorite fake natty influencer. And part of this industry has turned into a melting pot of desperate, insecure teens who have no idea how badly their physical and mental health will be affected in the long run. Steroids and other hormone replacement therapies come with a whole host of side effects, including infertility, cardiovascular issues, and a greatly increased risk of premature death.
Right, but as it turns out that risk of premature death is not greater than the risk of premature death from heart disease, diabetes. Context, guys, alcohol is riskier, obesity is riskier, heart disease and diabetes are riskier.
When I was at my very biggest, around 222 pounds, I remember how much worse I felt on a daily basis. And this is without the use of any performance-enhancing drugs, which I've never used. It felt like my entire day was dedicated to eating. By the end of the night, I had to force feed myself just so I could be bigger. On days where my abs didn't show as much, I might go so far as to do an extra workout when I was sore and increase my risk of injury just so my shirt fit a little tighter that day. I didn't sleep as well because I was eating so late, and this began to take a toll on my mental health. And if I missed a couple days at the gym because life got in the way or I went on vacation, I'd start getting anxious and worried that I was losing all my gains. I would look in the mirror, and here would be this objectively muscular, large man, but what I would see is an average to below average looking guy with a little bit of muscles on his body who didn't really deserve to be called a bodybuilder or an athlete or anything related to the fitness world.
Ratings of things being good enough or not good enough are 100%. They're subjective, but they're also relative. We run into this all the time. Every time I put up a goddamn video about strength standards, I'll show, I showed a bell curve of like what power lifters have done throughout history and, what's median, what are the extremes. And there's always somebody that comes in and is like, remember guys, only such and such a percent of the population can bench their body weight. And it's an attempt to take something which is not exceptional and that it's not very difficult to do once you commit yourself to it and frame it as being super exceptional because it stands apart in the population. Now, that goes to show that it actually is pretty easy to stand out in the general population. But to compare yourself to people that don't fucking lift, they're on a different curve than you are. They don't get the same grading scale. That's like being in an honors class voluntarily and then holding yourself to what the special ed kids are doing. It doesn't make any sense. So when he posts this picture of him being super jacked and says, I didn't look good enough, that's because he had very ambitious goals. He was grading himself, again, voluntarily on a steeper curve. This kid's over 6 foot and he's 220 pounds. The byproduct of all of the discipline he applied, I mean, he gave that, my meals ran my life and my sleep and I risked injury. Working out sore doesn't increase your risk of injury. He's reaching to talk about how he was like spreading his life thin. He committed to something hard that isn't a fraction as hard as trying to achieve in like a competitive professional field because he wanted to, and he lives in the first world and he has the luxury of being able to do that. And the byproduct was he looked like this and he was probably neck deep in fucking pussy. Look at that face. That's a face of a guy that just kicked some ratchet out of bed. He's probably showered with compliments day to day. He knows he's an authority, so much so that he has no problem posting regularly on IG to spread his influence. People obviously respond to him very well. He's got broad shoulders, he looks good, and he's big as shit. 220 at over 6 foot. He's objectively more jacked than Hugh Jackman was. He's objectively bigger than Gerard Butler was. I'm having a hard time seeing what the moral of the story is other than when you commit to very hard things and follow the steps, even when you don't feel like doing it, even when it sacrifices comfort and maybe your sense of well-being right now, the end result is that you get to take satisfaction in having done something really incredible. And being able to do that in multiple domains in your life is essential to being not just successful, but a well-adjusted, useful, worthwhile person. When he's saying I saw somebody that wasn't big enough, that's because he was voluntarily comparing himself to a competitive field that he probably could have actually competed in. But if you want to be a pro physique bodybuilder, yeah, you're not big enough. But you're comparing yourself to pros. And again, this goes back to your expectations are yours. It's not the job of other people to change what you see in your feed so that you don't have to curate your own expectations.
Start to change the fitness culture and give young men more realistic ideal to live up to. We're only going to see more young men suffer from this disorder. Look.
Oh, God, I hate that so much. There's so much fucking wrong with that. I'll go back to what I said earlier when he's like, some fitness content can be good. So what's realistic? Jesse James West, is that realistic? Is a homeboy here at over 6 foot, 220? He did it natty. Is that realistic? Is there an ethical problem? If you, as a dedicated athlete, get this physique, natty, and you promote it, aren't you setting an unreachable standard if such a big percentage of the population will never reach this? What is a fucking realistic standard? People that don't train? People that don't show excellence in anything? And by the way, speaking of realistic standards, how many people on Reddit are calling this guy a fake natty? I mean, look at those shoulders and that waist.
My very biggest, around 222 pounds. I remember how much worse I felt on a daily basis.
Also, he's talking about how worse he felt. Go talk to anybody who's in the throes of Hell Week during football, any competitive football player, anybody who voluntarily signs up for a bodybuilding prep, like, it doesn't feel good. He keeps conflating, and this is a problem with all of us, performance and fitness. And he keeps saying health should be the priority. No, if you want health to be the priority, there's ways to go about that. But performance will always be something that attracts a lot of people, and it should. And maximizing performance comes at the extremes. It comes at the cost of your health. But even when you're not going to the extremes, it comes at the cost of your immediate sense of comfort, which is part of the fucking point. People that try very hard to excel at sports don't feel great most of the time. You feel beat up and tired and lethargic. So unless you have the mindset that thrives from that type of competition, which I think everybody can learn to get, yeah, that's going to be your experience. Now, if people aren't told that, hey, this is okay, and this is part of a long-term satisfaction, is being kind of uncomfortable right now, they would start to get the tools that would allow them to respond to that more positively. However, I'm going to say it, like, I just don't believe this guy. Like, I believe he kind of felt some of the things he did at some points, but I think he's trying to twist his own experience as a motivated kid that experienced a bunch of positives from training, who had a good physique and good looking dude, and probably saw just a shit ton of benefits as he got over 6 foot, 220 and lean. That's a big fucking dude. To tell me that he was so overcome with mental health issues that he had to quit, I'm sorry, I just don't believe him. And I think it's really disingenuous to try to exaggerate things you felt at some point so that you can try to relate to people that might actually be going through it. Because at the end of the day, they're still looking at you over 6 foot, 220 and jacked, and wondering why they should feel any better about looking at your physique.
Look, nobody can deny that young men's increasing interest in fitness and health comes with a ton of benefits. Like I explored in my last video, young people are doing less drugs, drinking less, and placing a heavy emphasis on different protocols to live longer and feel better. But like all things, it becomes a problem when it's taken to the extreme, and the current digital landscape of social media often rewards extremes over authenticity.
So he hit the nail on the head right there. It's the digital landscape, it's social media, which everybody knows and should be taught from a very early age, emphasizes extremes, things that are manipulated, fabricated from nothing, things that are fictitious. It should not be seen as anything more than a fantasy novel. And that is the ultimate tool that people need to have if they want to use social media and be okay. This should have been a video about social media, not about the simple existence of unattainable physiques, because that's not a thing, because you're not entitled to be able to attain anybody's physique because you have your genetics and that's it. What's missing and what's really unsatisfying, because like, I don't hate this kid. There's probably a lot he has to offer, and I'm sure a lot of his work is good and thorough. But on this particular topic, I feel like he has so much positive shit that he could give to people that are struggling, that would tell them how to set sights on high goals and survive and be better off because they chase them, rather than giving into the doom and gloom of massive mental health crisis because people are seeing excellent performers. It sets a precedent that you should expect to not be okay if you are shown people that have more than you do. That's not a tenable way to live in the world.
Influencer, I'm still heavily invested in a fit lifestyle. Only now I've cultivated a much healthier balance with it. My goal is no longer to be as big and muscular as I can, but rather have a fit and functional body. One that can lift heavy weights, yes, but also be athletic enough to sprint fast, run long distances, and be mobile and flexible. Does that mean I miss a workout every once in a while? Yes, but it doesn't take away from the progress I've made. If anything, it makes me make more progress in the future because I am more well rested and I have a better workout. I've started to prioritize getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night, and my energy levels are ironically way higher than when I was overexerting myself lifting weights. And you know what the funniest part is? I'm 22 pounds down from my heaviest weight, but I personally feel like I look better than I ever have.
That's because objectively you do look better than you ever have, because you have about the same amount of muscle mass, you just leaned up. You went from 220 to 198. That's called a cut, bro. Remember what I've been saying? Most of the people you think are super duper jacked, unreasonably jacked, you think the muscle they have that's so hard to get? No. They're super jacked because their body fat is lower. Typically, people with lower body fat will look better even if they have less muscle than somebody else. So he's selling this as, well, I stopped focusing on size. I'm not given to bigorexia anymore, bro. I stopped chasing the dragon. Now I'm just focused on being healthy. Those are arbitrary goals, by the way. Whether you want to be big for aesthetic purposes, that's not like worse than if you want to be a hybrid athlete. I mean, you could say the same thing. Be careful, man. You're going to be seeing people's Fran times, and you're going to be seeing high rocks athletes, and it's going to make you feel bad because you don't measure up. Everything can be taken to the extreme. The fact that he's focused on general fitness isn't special, but it sounds like he's saying he took it down a notch. That's the real lesson here, because it's actually more productive. And this is another point that I think is going to be missed by a lot of people. That's actually a positive from this video. There's always a point where hitting the gas requires you to take a step back. Pro bodybuilders sleep a fuck ton. They sleep a lot at night. They nap during the day. So to not have enough sleep, that's a performance problem. It's going to affect your performance just as much as your ability to influence your physique and gain mass. But even this, like, his regimen could not have changed that much for him to look like this. Because if he didn't care about eating enough protein, if he didn't care about resting, if he didn't care about his training, if he wasn't hitting the weights as hard, he wouldn't have maintained the muscularity he has. So the lesson here is, hey, I learned some things that were spreading me thin that were unnecessary. So now I take a smarter approach to training. Actually, the real lesson should be that, hey, you can have a really badass physique without fucking killing yourself. And if you're killing yourself, you're probably doing it wrong. But because this is in a video about the body image crisis and the representation of muscular people, that gets skipped over because it really has to be about the fact that he was focused on being big in the first place, not the stupid way that he went about it.
And that's because my perception of my physique is no longer distorted by the media I consume. Okay. You know what? Sometimes it does come up. I'll check my abs in the mirror, make sure I'm still like shredded. But
it's because my perception of my physique is no longer distorted by the media. Bro, you are the picture that is distorting people's point of view. What are you talking about? Look at this shoulder to waist ratio. Again, Hugh Jackman, 6'2", under 200 pounds, was not this lean. You're more jacked than Hugh. Most fitness professionals think that this guy was on steroids. So by trying to use yourself as like a sympathetic case or like a victim, like I think you really missed the mark here, bro, because there's a big fucking question mark as to why your presence is now a force for good when you objectively look better than everybody else. And it goes to show that bigorexia is an entirely different thing. People just want to look good, and that can mean a lot of different things. People focus on gaining muscle because gaining muscle is hard. Getting lean is short. It's easy. It's linear. But let that be a lesson. Do I got to show you idiots fucking Bobby Pandora again? This guy was probably like 5'7", and he looks muscular as shit, but he probably had about as much muscle as a golden retriever. He looks like this because there's no body fat on him. This is like the typical fucking 1900 dock worker if you just shredded him up into nothing. So again, another lesson, it's not just the endless chasing of being big, which very, very, very few people get caught in that trap. The lesson should be that having a good physique is attainable by anybody because getting lean can be done by anybody within a couple of months.
if you're struggling with the same body image issues I've struggled with in the past, I really recommend putting a bit of distance between you and the online fitness world. These guys almost never look the way they do in photos and videos in real life. You want to know what they actually look like? Here's me with a pump in good lighting, and here's me with no pump in bad.
Oh, no. More disingenuous bullshit. All right, first of all, the guys you follow that give you bigorexia, the bodybuilders, the people with 20-inch arms and like 28-inch waists, those people do absolutely look like they do. The same goes for NFL players. The fucking NFL players that look jacked as shit, they look like that in real life. Go to any fit expo. You see the strongman walking around, they're bigger in real life than they are on TV. You see the bodybuilders walking around with 22-inch arms, they look like human rhinoceri from Zootopia. Yes, people that are really big and jacked, they look big and jacked in real life. Now, if you're following, teens that are doing with the chick thing where they're constantly like twisting their waist and taking shots from the bottom up or whatever, fucking with the lighting, it's like, yeah, there's some margin for error, but that's not going to make you look like an IFBB pro. Quick test, put on some overhead lighting, take your shirt off, take a shot. Do your abs look like that? No, then you're still fat. This is a pretty candid shot. Okay, he's got a pump, but there's not a lot of fuckery going on here. You could say that it's optimized for jackedness. This is optimized to look like a human slug. This is disingenuous in the opposite direction. He's got his elbows in to make his lats look smaller and shoulders look smaller. He's taking a bottom-up picture so the abdominals look thicker because they're in the foreground. Look, here, you can't see the roof here. That's because this is dead on. You can see the roof because the camera is bottom up. And with the baggy shorts, he looks like shit here. If he was standing relaxed from the same shot, he would still look like a big dude who's 6 foot plus, 200 pounds and lean.
Bad lighting. They're almost incomparable, and you shouldn't be comparing yourself to other people's physiques anyway, especially not the edited fake natty ones on social media. Everybody has their own genetic potential, and that means you might never reach what is genetically achievable for that guy you look up to online, even if they are a lifetime natural. And that is okay.
That's the best thing you've said in this whole video. That's absolutely right. And if that is the case, then it doesn't matter if they're not natural, because you still only have your own genetic potential. Am I wrong?
Fitness is about looking good, sure, but the primary focus should be about feeling good. And if your fitness...
No! Fitness means fit. It means physically fit. Feeling good is a different goal. Stop it.
...regimen right now is doing you more harm than good, then it's time to switch things up and honestly do a lot of inner work. The more that you ask questions like, why am I placing my value as a person only on my physique? And where might this insecurity have developed from? That's when you start to build awareness around this problem. And when you build awareness around your problems, that is when you start the process of developing a better relationship with yourself. We need more realistic representations of body standards in the media. So if you're someone who posts about bodybuilding or fitness, be the person that isn't afraid to be vulnerable about their body image issues and occasionally makes posts about what you really look like most of the time, just like I've done in the past.
No, we do not need more representation. And this is what gets me about this. This is this weird, it's like we're trying to copy the playbook of like women and like feminists from like 30 years ago when they were hyper fixated on like skinny models. It's the same type of thing because there was a ton of pressure put on women to look a certain way, and it was made worse by the representation. However, that was uniquely different because women put that pressure on each other. They'll try to spin it like men's standards are somehow responsible for it, which is nonsense. Men did not decide that Kate Moss was like the sexiest woman alive. No single person did that. They don't go to French fashion shows. The fashion industry is ran by women, and women throughout school and adolescence punish each other for fashion choices. Men don't punish women for their fashion choices because they don't give a fuck. Men are pretty easy to please. Anyways, so you had assembly after public service announcement about women's issues and representation. Well, we have that experiment. Representation shifted. There's more body types. Actually, it turns out shocking that men actually like women with a bit of meat on their bones. So we have a lot more bigger women. Some of them are a bit too big, but you have these body types, but they're not any more realistic just because they're bigger. They're still more exaggerated. It's bigger butt and hips, small waist, big chest with women that are objectively gorgeous. And now you have women breaking themselves trying to meet that standard. And the narrative has just arbitrarily shifted because it used to be that plastic surgery was putting this horrific, unsustainable, unrealistic expectation on women to compete with other women who were surgically modified. Now, plastic surgery is like going to the fucking dentist. It's something that has been relabeled. Now it's like empowering. It's normal. I'm sure not all women will agree with that, but the climate has absolutely changed. So all we've seen is definitions get changed and the can get kicked, and nothing really positive or sustainable or objectively good has been done in service of eliminating this stress. So to copy that playbook is so fucking bizarre. There isn't an amount of representation that you can get. We can't even define what that is. He thinks he's good representation. What is good representation? So no, more men doing the chick thing where they push their gut out and say, this is what a real man looks like. That is not the thing. Men need high standards. Look, to summarize all of this, I understand that there is a problem with mental health issues at the fringe, but I don't think this video accurately labeled how prevalent it is. I think they overblew that a ton. I think they included a bunch of people that shouldn't be there, like regular ass gym goers. And because of that, I don't think it can give good advice. When you don't triage, when you don't focus on the most extreme, the people in the most need, you cannot give advice specific to them. When you go broad, the advice gets watered down. And this is all watered down advice. None of this is going to help somebody who's actually in the throes of a severe mental health crisis where they would actually get labeled with bigorexia bigorexia or muscle dysmorphia. This is like generic shit to make the average dude on Instagram, I don't know, feel better, or like he doesn't have to be so hard on himself. Social media is the big problem, but the only thing that's going to fix it is your relationship with it. And that's something that other people cannot do for you. Now, the biggest gripe that I have with all of this, aside from that, is that it's counter to what men actually need. Men actually need competition. The things that are absent today, community, support, direction, structure, they're good for the sake of it. They're essential by themselves. But together, they all give the framework that supports healthy competition, which men need, the way a dog needs exercise. Think about a dog you keep inside all day. How anxious does he have to get to run around in circles? Think of a tiger you keep in a cage and you don't give him so much as a tire to play with. People would call it inhumane. And we live our lives inside, sedentary. We don't have activity. And men specifically are losing a handle on the things that they can do to stand out. We're falling behind in education. We're more isolated. We're more sedentary. We still suffer from depression and anxiety. We still take up the most dangerous jobs. Men have issues. And if you steal away from men the singular thing that we are programmed to do, which is to be ambitious, to set big goals and prove to ourselves that even if we don't get them, we get close. And that if we fail, we can learn and do it again. Again, it's the give a man a fish. If you take away from men the fact that they're responsible for learning how to fish, you've taken away more than all of that other shit combined. So I take exception to anything that shows a problem with mental health and suggests that the solution is all of society reorienting itself until you're okay, because that future doesn't fucking exist. And the process of trying to do that is to neuter men. So you need the framework of real people giving direction, support, and structure, or else you're on your own, coming up with your own bullshit evaluations based on your mood and your vibe, based off this endless screen of bullshit you're glued to. So it really can be summarized as go find a community, go find people, because the more you engage around that, the more centered and grounded and realistic your expectations will be, and the more joy and fulfillment and purpose you'll have in the things that you actually do. The gym draws many people who are insecure because improving your physique is an element of self-help. So of course, that's who's going to be represented. But without that real in-person community and the direct feedback you get from teammates, coaches, opponents, the people you compete against, you're going to be blind to the hierarchy of excellence, how excellence actually happens, what qualities they have, what they did, and whether or not you're even interested in pursuing it that far. The lesson here isn't that men are expected to do too much. Men should be expected to do too much, but the things that they do have to be grounded in some framework. And for all of the famous figures and endless content online, that framework is absent. That is the problem. So that's all I got for today, guys. That is my rant on the male body image crisis. I do think it's overblown. And I think the strategy that are going to get men out of whatever issues they are facing is just diametrically opposed to the type of shit that's popping up in these cookie cutter video essays. So let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you think I'm an insensitive prick? Tell me below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.